Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of The Agenda. This is our second part for the United States presidential elections. And while we'd covered most of the initial trends in our podcast earlier in the day, our intention to cover for this second part, apart from possible strategic implications and polling methods and the like, we'll be going over some of the basics uh, as to the changes that have occurred since we were last live, right? So, very warm welcome to all of our viewers and those in the audience who are joining in from across the country. So I'll just go over some of the very basic changes that have happened since, right? The election has still not been called in favor of any candidate, right? But I'm going to sort of go over some of the key battleground states which are still up for grabs. We have Nevada, which is showing up on the screen, I believe. Right. I will. Yes. Let's just wait to sort of get Nevada on. Yep, there it is. Right. So we have Nevada, which is pretty close at the moment, right? Which is less than about 8,000 votes away. A fair bit of it is still expected to come in from Clark County, which has been the Democratic stronghold for decades. But at the same time, it's still not been called for the Biden campaign. The reason for that is that you still have 40% votes to come in, and the margin has been decreasing over the day. So there's still a possibility that Trump might be able to carry this, and in the case that he loses one of the Rust Belt states, winning Nevada might be a necessity for his path to victory, right? But there's a likelihood that these votes, which come in again, which might be mail-in ballots and would come in from Clark County, there's a likelihood that those would not go for the Republicans and they would go in favor of Joe Biden, right? So that's the current status there. But Arizona, once again, the Trump campaign apparently still is sort of hopeful, but at the same time, we have about 98%, more than 98% estimated votes to have been reported. The margin is still huge in terms of at least the difference with Nevada. So it's unlikely that Trump can win in Arizona either. Right. Again, I'm sort of drawing from what many of the American media outfits have been talking about as well, but it's unlikely just going by the current numbers. Right? Again, Trump would have to sort of would have to win pretty much all the remaining votes to sort of get a chance of winning Arizona. Right? Like getting back to Georgia, like now though Georgia had been with Trump since morning, right? Trump had been leading, and he's won it earlier. It's been a state that Republicans have been winning. It's not been like Michigan or Wisconsin where okay, Trump won as a one-off in the last 25 odd years. But what we see here is, and this is something that we stressed upon even earlier in the day, is there are still votes to come in from Atlanta, Portland. Sure, at this point we see it close to 98%, but here's the deal. We've been seeing Georgia stuck at 91% since the morning. Right? At this point, we still see it at around 92%. So the counting is sort of significantly slowed down. Right? You have Chatham County here, where still 20% of the votes are still to come in. Right? This would be at least about 20,000 more votes. Right? Sure. Let's have a look at the margin there. The margin currently is still about less than 4,000 votes. Sorry. Pardon me, less than 104,000 votes, pardon me. So that's still going to be something that would be favoring Trump. So we have some counties here, Radio Stewart County, and you have, again, here you still have about 15% odd votes still coming in, but again, Biden would have to win pretty much everything there to stand a chance to win. Right? So this is something that would go in Trump's favor. So this is 16 electoral votes in Arizona and Nevada put together are 17 electoral votes, while Trump still has a slight chance in Nevada. North Carolina, again, has been stuck at 95% since the morning. It was around 94% at some point, and it reached 95%. And there's no such significant change in terms of the lead. Right? Trump has been 1.5%, pretty much 1.5% alone in terms of the lead that he has over Biden in North Carolina, right? But it's not expected that Biden can sort of win here without sort of winning pretty much everything that is pending there, right? So again, perhaps Orange County to win sort of pretty much everything else. Sure, it is something where we expect sort of Biden to perform. He has been performing well. He's got 75% there, but again, it's unlikely that, or the likelihood is less for sort of Biden to win in North Carolina, right? Again, so while still entertaining the possibility that both North Carolina and Georgia are open, both are tilting towards Trump at this point, and North Carolina carries 15 electoral votes, right? So again, Pennsylvania, we're still stuck around. So again, it's increased a bit since then. We still have about 23 odd percent votes to still come in, and Trump's lead is still above about 550 or what we can see from here. It's about 550,000 vote share. So again, Biden is to win about 70, more than 70, 80% to be able to sort of stand a chance there. But again, Pennsylvania is still not necessary for Biden to necessarily sort of get to the White House, right? So, and what's the path? So, if Biden can get Michigan and or Wisconsin, depending on how these two states perform, that's Nevada and Arizona. Let's have a look at Michigan before we sort of move forward. Again, Michigan, Trump had been leading pretty much throughout the entirety of the day, right? But very recently, perhaps just about an hour or so ago, perhaps even less, we saw Biden taking the lead there. Right? This is just very recent. We were stuck around a similar vote share that had been reported in terms of the estimates around that point. But now Biden is leading by about 0.2% here. Right? So again, the margin is still very less. Right? Trump won it by a very thin margin even in 2016, but there's still a possibility that Trump might be able to win this as well. Right? So this is anyone's game because the margin here is again 0.2%. Again, both Michigan and Wisconsin, there's a likelihood that this might even meet the threshold for a recount, right? That's where we might even see some litigation coming into play, perhaps Republican side moving Supreme Court. So things could sort of, the drama could sort of increase multi-fold, right? But getting to the current numbers in Wisconsin, again, this is around 97%. It's been sort of moving very slowly. It was about 93 for a long period of time, and then the difference between that 94 to 95% is effectively where Biden takes the lead somehow, right? We will look at the charts in terms of how that sort of overtake sort of happens, right? We would be looking at that as well. But then again, the margin here still is less than about 5.7%. So again, if you look at the sort of numbers, it's just about 20 odd thousand that Biden is leading by. But still, again, it's still too close to call, right? There's a likelihood show that Trump is to perform exceedingly well, right? We saw, again, I will look at the counties here when Milwaukee votes came in. Again, we can look at that difference there, that 69.1% is how Biden's leading, and then you have Kenosha here, where you have 50.7% for Trump, and you have approximately 47.6% for Biden, right? Pretty much voting's pretty much done here, despite just about less than 2% left. But that's pretty much also the state of Wisconsin, right? Again, the Trump campaign has been emphasizing that they would be, Wisconsin would be open to even recount. That's pretty much it in terms of a basic position as to where we stand. Right. I will. We also have some of our panelists who joined us. We have Shire joining in, and we have
Yeah.
Dhananjay who's also joining in. We're having some technical difficulties with Dhananjay. So welcome,
Hmm.
Shire.
Hi.
I've been told that your vote has been sent to the state of California, and it is in
Hmm.
the process of being counted. Right. So I don't think there is going to be much dispute pertaining to how California will turn out to be,
Yeah.
or has turned out to be already. It has been brought to
Hmm.
Biden. But any sort of just
Yeah.
your initial comments on the current status as to where we are, just very brief comments um, on the current
So
situation, which is perhaps going to go in uh, for a couple of days, perhaps even a week or so. We're not
yeah.
sure about how long this will last.
Right. So I'm actually interested, like, mostly with seeing how, for example, the Great Lake states sort of fare, and I'm looking at Wisconsin and Michigan because these are going to go down to the wire. Because if, for example, Biden does indeed end up winning Michigan, that's going to be a very big win for him. Um, I do feel like so. I mean, I've been looking at some of the comments that are coming in from the Trump campaign. One, of course, is the recent, very latest tweet that he's posted so far, I believe, where Trump is now claiming that there is something fishy about this entire process, which, of course, is standard fare for like U.S. elections. It's something that we've seen in the past for a very long time. So, right. Like I do feel
Yeah,
like, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, okay. We will get in your comment first, and then
Yeah.
you,
So,
you say.
like one of the things that I'm actually really interested to see is, especially with the swing states, like, like for example, a lot of like there hasn't been a lot of variance in the bastion states, like for example Texas, etc. Or like if you look at like let's say non-swing states like California, Hawaii, etc., or Alaska for that matter. But like it's going to be interesting to see if with this win, Biden can like if he does end up winning, and which seems to be fairly likely because he is now starting to pull ahead consequentially. It's going to be interesting to see his immediate sort of
Oh,
repercussions to the
yeah.
lobbies in the
So,
US.
I want to sort of build up on that, right? And we were receiving some uh, infographics, right? And this is I'm going to
Hmm,
go to this tweet by Joe Norman. Again, the original tweet isn't by Joe Norman, really. Right? This is
hmm,
I'm just going to sort of get that up first. Right? So once we get there, then I'll sort of share this. Right. So this is let's see. Hmm. Okay. So Dhananjay, in case you're seeing this, this is I'm also sharing this with you, right? And for our audience here, Mr. Joe
hmm,
Norman is involved with the Real World Risk program, and he's the founder of Applied Complexity Science and Logistics.
hmm.
And again, sure, I'm just sort of getting that because that appeared on my feed,
Twitter
but
feed,
this is the
probably.
image that we're trying to look at here. Right? And I think
Yeah.
Donald Trump is also, I've been told, has also retweeted this, though
Hmm.
as the
So,
tweet saying that some of this
yeah.
content shared in this tweet is disputed and might be misleading about an election or other civic process, right? But let's look at these numbers,
Hmm,
right? This is, if we look at that sort of vertical rise
hmm,
in that
hmm,
Biden vote share in the state of
hmm,
Michigan, that is, if I'm going by the information that I have here, right? Again, this is by
hmm,
multiple commentators. Obviously, I mean, one can assume that they are
hmm, hmm,
Republicans or supporters of President
hmm,
Donald Trump. The change
hmm.
is 128,000 votes,
Yeah.
right? The
So,
change is
yeah.
about 128,000 votes, and I'll
Hmm,
also sort of
hmm,
share
hmm,
that particular tweet in, right? And in that change, you do not see that's the change from 128,000 votes added and
Yeah.
no additions for the Trump
Mm.
vote share in that regard. Any comments? Again, I'm not
Yeah.
sort of going to start attributing malpractice here, Shire, but
So
any comments
yeah,
that you
so
would
what
like
happens
to?
is yeah, so what happens is, so there are actually like some logical explanations and of course some more nefarious explanations to this process. One of the logical explanations, which I think Trump also touches upon, which is the concept of the mystery vote dump. But honestly, it's not actually a very big mystery because the way votes are counted, right, especially this election, there is an abnormal number of postal ballots because obviously in person, like, or other forms of voting are disabled. So, like, the thing with the postal ballot and the way it works is that what you're looking at. So when this reporting is happening and these numbers are coming in, they come in reporting stages. Like think of it like, in yesteryear sort of switchboard where information is being piled and then reported to an agency, and of course then and then it's going to be sort of displayed. Now there is a chance, which is probabilistically really small, that a lot of these, like the reporting happened in such a way where there was only, for example, accounting for one interest group. This does happen. For
Okay,
example,
so
especially with
I'm going to,
overseas votes.
Shire, allow me to come in
Yeah.
here. Uh, while I absolutely get the point that you're trying to make here, and again, my
Hmm.
knowledge of sort of the specific logistics around, let's say, voting in the United States, the state of Michigan, I cannot claim to be any sort of having any practical experience or expertise in that. But my
Hmm.
understanding is that when mail-in ballots do come in, right, and we cannot possibly say that all the votes for one candidate were piled together in terms of how voting sort of mail-in ballots were coming in. Are you getting the point? I
Hmm.
understand that, sure, a particular region is going to be more inclined towards voting towards a particular candidate, right? But
Hmm.
saying that you have 128,000 votes and not a single one of them goes to there's a change of 128,000 votes. Either the situation was that all the maiden ballots that were coming in, or perhaps there could be sort of other
Hmm.
sort of votes as well, that they were being stored and they were sort of waiting
Hmm.
for the next set of votes to come in, and post that they'll say, okay, fine, all of these votes were for
Yeah.
Biden, and we were sort of
No,
waiting to sort of share them out.
you're right. No, no, you're absolutely right about that. See, the thing is, I'm not actually convinced that it's a mail-in vote. Like, as I said, like it could be a deficiency in reporting. Like, again, you can attribute malice there, where, for example, let's say somebody suppressed the value initially and then just like flooded it to create. Well, it's like a really ridiculous sort of like jump in votes, right? The other explanation, apart from like technicality, is quite frankly, it's possible that like for example, some of the counties or internal this thing swung so hard that there was
Hmm.
zilch voting done. Like that's definitely possible. But again, like logic dictates that look, even in a county which is very Democrat, there will be some odd person, like some interest group that's gonna vote the other way. Right? Even if they don't vote Republican, they're going to vote like Libertarian or Green. Like there's going to be some difference in that sort of like, whatever. But so it's very like ridiculous. But yes, like, I do feel like one of the more probable answers to this is, of course, if you're looking at explaining it away, it is reporting. But again, you could argue that that reporting is motivated because it does seem like that, right? Because the way it's moved now, the narrative has shifted completely in Michigan. So, like at some point, I do feel like Michigan, however, still goes to Trump. That thing will sort of like go away. Like once Michigan's votes are finally counted. What is the current state of the votes? What is the scene with the
Yeah, let's
report?
go back to, again, it's not like I think anything is changing, but we can sort of go back to the tracker.
Yeah. We're really close right now.
Okay, so we're back in Michigan. Again, it's not like it's sort of changing, right?
No, it's
Uh,
not.
yeah, it's,
Yeah.
I think, pretty much the same. And
Hmm.
let's give it a refresh because I don't think we,
Our live data here.
yeah, we just get a sense of it. Yes, it's at 90% here in Michigan.
Yeah, so there's a bit of variance now that's left, honestly.
Yes. Again,
Hmm.
we're at about, let's say, 10,000 votes. Right? Trump's about
Hmm.
10.2%. Uh, then again, let's have a look at
Behind.
Ann Arbor is done there. Again, Wayne County, 30% of the votes. Okay, Wayne County, I think, still a huge number to come in. That's what it looks like. Uh,
Hmm.
Biden is leading there, has been leading there, right?
Wayne County, yeah, like I mean, it's a very popular Democrat neighborhood. Like, good, like sort of like
Yeah. So again,
interesting. I
again, most of these urban areas, you will see that the again. So we can't expect that uh, in much of the again 98% polling in. So I don't think much of the change is going to come from either of these areas. McCombs at 96, Trump's leading just by a bit. Not much difference. Uh, we can expect there to the final tally, right? Maybe
Hmm,
some
hmm, hmm,
percent here, percent there. We can look at some where are the larger numbers if you were to. Yeah, I think the larger numbers are going to be down here south, right?
yeah, like
Yeah.
those are
So this is
underreported,
where you
yeah.
will have most of your numbers. So I think it will come down to Wayne
Yeah.
County, Shire. It will
Yeah.
come down to Wayne County, and
Hmm,
I still think that if you have about 10% odd remaining, the margin is 0.2% currently.
yeah,
Uh,
it can go either way.
it could still be anyone's game, right? And let's
Yeah,
go
it
with this
is.
assumption for once, right? Before we again we're expecting some guests also join us at around 9:30. But before that, let's sort of go over possible permutations, combinations, right? Okay, so let's assume that Pennsylvania ends up going the Trump way, right? Again, the question only is the Philadelphia votes and how
Hmm.
that part's going to roll out. It's just a question of sort of counting the rest of the votes. I think because the tally is increasing just by a bit in the sense of Pennsylvania, right? It's been increasing slowly and steadily. But I think
Hmm.
Trump still maintains a decent lead there. Right? So Pennsylvania, I'm just going to assume that Trump has an upper hand.
Hmm.
Same with North Carolina and Georgia. Again, because these are essentials, right? Without them, Trump's not even in play. So again, for there to be any
Yeah, if he
contest, I'm
loses
going to
one of
assume
these,
that
yeah.
again these are going. Georgia has been sort of coming down to the wire, but I think uh, it, there's a likelihood that Trump will sort of at least he has
Hmm.
been sort of get. I think that lead is still there, right? And
Yeah.
I think the lead has gotten better. We were at 91%, and the lead was sort of slightly less. We don't know if it's sort of the total number sort of
Hmm.
increased since then. So again, let's assume that Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia go the Trump way, and then if he wins Nevada, if Trump wins Nevada, which is again, it's too close to call, right? In that sense, it's about 8,000 odd votes away. There's still about 14% left. Again, it's unlikely that Trump will end up winning, but if he does win, then one of Michigan or Wisconsin, preferably Michigan, would
Hmm.
sort of get him through. Right, like losing
Hmm.
Wisconsin won't be an issue if he can sort of handle Nevada. Right, that's the
Hmm.
electoral
Hmm.
calculus. But at the same time,
Hmm.
if Trump loses both Nevada and Arizona, he would have to win both Wisconsin and Michigan. That's
Yeah. That's going to
that's
be a
something to
difficult challenge.
see out. Sorry,
Yeah.
you
That's
were
going to be a
something there.
difficult challenge. Yeah, like I was
Yeah,
saying,
so
it's going to
again,
be difficult.
I think it's effectively we're looking at a repeat of 2016 for Trump to win, and the only
Hmm.
flipping state would be Arizona, right? So if you
Yeah.
go by 2016 numbers again, both Michigan and Wisconsin were damn close even back in 2016.
Yeah, 20.
So
Yeah.
again, once again, we see them sort of going down to the wire here. Right? I think
Yeah.
Wisconsin, they've been emphasizing they want to sort of maybe go into a retrial, not retrial, pardon me, recount. and it might sort of end up with some sort
Yeah,
of
it might get
deviation if
lost.
Trump
Yeah.
sort of coming, right? And Michigan again is sort of turning out to be even closer, right? Michigan, we were assuming earlier
Yeah.
that okay, this is going to go Trump way, like you said, right? That if Biden wins now, but here's the irony, right? That Michigan up until 2016 was a state that the Democrats had not lost in 25 years. Right? The last time they lost before
Yeah.
Trump in a presidential election was when Ronald Reagan split the entire country, right? Barring that one
Yeah.
state. So the fact that Trump won Michigan last time around is was a big thing in itself, and he had to win
Mm.
Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Right? Again, the Rust Belt has traditionally voted as one block over the years,
Mm.
so that has been a
Mm.
factor. Right? There is
Mm.
a likelihood that that still happen. Right? Again, Michigan,
Yeah.
Wisconsin, both could go the same way, whichever way. Again, both are open. Both could go the same
Mm.
way. Right? So that is an important factor. But here's the deal, right? Again, if Trump gets Wisconsin, Michigan, then he wins. But assuming here that obviously he wins the rest of the three states where he's leading and he's more comfortable than in Michigan or Wisconsin. Right? But
Yeah, I think
he just needs to lose any one of these and he's out.
yeah, he's
Right?
out basically. Yeah.
Obviously, anything,
Mm.
the only thing he can afford to lose is perhaps Nevada. Right? And then
Yeah.
and it can't be that okay he loses Michigan or loses Wisconsin and he can still get a path. The only
Mm.
way he has another path is perhaps if he loses Wisconsin but gets Nevada. Right?
Yeah.
Uh, that's the other path that could go the Trump way.
Also,
But
honestly, I think
other than that,
Arizona is gonna go. Yeah.
sorry, you were saying something?
Yeah, I was saying that honestly, looking at the current like statistics, if the trend continues, Arizona seems to be out of Trump's reach. Unless because look, we do have about 14% of the vote remaining or whatever, but given the lead, like, it's difficult to conceive that because there, I mean, it's not a lot of lead, but sure, like if Arizona if goes to Biden, then it becomes even tighter a condition for him to win. So,
Yeah. So
like,
again,
how will,
uh,
yeah.
if Trump, but I don't think I think you're sort of correct that sort of Arizona isn't going to go the Trump way. I think it's
Mhm.
highly unlikely. Right? I think the vote share that still
Yes, I am.
remains. Sure, you have about 14 odd percent still remaining there, and Trump has maneuverability in terms of sort of
Mhm.
room to. Oh, okay. So there is an error that was reported. Let's just have a look at that. There's an
Hmm.
error that was reported here. I'm going to read this out for the benefit of our viewers and for you as well. I think it's on our screen, so I think that should be visible. Due to an error in an Edison Research data feed of results, the estimate of the counted vote in Arizona was too high. The actual estimate is that 86% of the vote has been counted. Okay, so there
Hmm.
is some scope or some room for the Trump campaign
Hmm.
to claim that listen, this isn't over yet. Right? I think that was the issue that I think earlier we were assuming that this is sort of above 90 odd percent, where the race was pretty much
Yeah.
closed. I think that's the basis on which we also
Hmm.
were suggesting that listen, it's going to be
Hmm.
damn difficult for Trump to sort of be able to put anything off here.
Hmm.
But now considering that this is uh, Trump is slightly behind, right? Again, I think the race in uh, yeah, this is pretty much similar, right? With 92% Trump's
Yeah.
50.5 versus 48.3, with 86%
Hmm.
51 to 47.6. So these are similar sort of races. But then again,
Hmm.
uh, Georgia generally goes the Republican way, and Arizona tends to, again, it is Arizona was won by Trump last time. So that's also an important factor. So
Hmm.
sort of might be sort of considered in polls and like that. Listen, this Trump can't really win this,
Yeah.
but Trump won it last time round, and I think it's
Hmm.
still if it's only 86% of the votes that have been counted. We don't know
Hmm.
what part. Let's have a look at the parts from where we again. So Pima County, we still again. It's not like Trump's going to sort of be in the lead there, but we still have 10% of the votes
Yeah.
coming in from there. Um,
Hmm.
looking sort of counties where the rest of the vote share is sort of going to come in from again. Democratic strongholds, but not a lot of votes there. This is still just okay. So again, Apache County, not a lot of votes there again, but still about 40% from the county still to come in, right? Again,
Yeah.
most of the votes again Democratic uh, bent. Perhaps again here we have Trump actually leading
Mm.
by quite a margin in terms of just in the percentages, and we still have about 24% of the vote to still come
Yeah.
in your southern counties, right? Where Trump is leading. Graham County, again, Trump's leading, but not much more vote to come in there. Again, not many
Mm.
votes here, though even Trump's leading. So again, just rely on these sort of southern counties in Arizona. Again, there's 10% or vote remaining here. But again, Trump has to pretty much do the same here what Biden has to accomplish in Georgia for him to be able to
Yeah.
sort of get a victory there, right?
You know,
Again, we've gone over this in terms of the paths. Um, any comments, Shire, on again? We discussed the idea, right? Again, that there was a vertical, it's pretty much a vertical increase with those sort of 128
yeah. Yeah.
votes. Like, there's a likelihood that the fact that Trump's uh, retweeting this, the fact that his campaign is tweeting about it, this sure,
Mm.
as you correctly said, and that's what I sort of began by saying as well, that most of this is going to come from the Trump campaign side, or people who support us of the Trump campaign. So that's going to be there, but that could lead to some amount of litigation starting. I'm told that, like, what we were sort of discussing even in the podcast in the morning was that certainly I think Wednesday morning there will be sort of cases in Pennsylvania that will be happening, right? In terms of sort of at what point votes were
Yeah.
coming in, what point votes were sort of starting, they were starting the count, and on that regard, in that regard, Pennsylvania will get into litigation, and there's a likelihood that if other states also sort of turn out to be damn close, specifically
Mm.
Wisconsin and Michigan, that ultimately it
Mm.
goes down to the wire. And this could be a
Mm.
2000 recount, the situation we had in Florida in Bush versus Gore.
Yeah.
There is a
Yeah.
likelihood that that situation could come up again. Right, I think
Otherwise,
the
yeah.
idea of sort of mail-in ballots, especially in this sort of COVID year, is going to be something that will significantly
Yeah, it's more
impact.
crucial than normal. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
Like the mail-in ballots are actually, the major like hurdle on a technicality basis for counting and validation because they take longer. And so like for example, right now, like like from what sources I can gather, it does, however, look like that the math in Wisconsin is getting really bad for Trump because it's a lot. Like there's no in almost the entire voting pool has been reported. Um, So there's that.
Yeah,
But
but then again, the okay, we're at about 97 odd percent, and as we discussed earlier, I think the difference is about 21,000 odd
would
votes.
say
Again,
share.
yes, you're right that the number is it's sort of going out of Trump's grasp, but I think it
Yeah,
could
ballpark, yeah.
still be again. Where do we have the rest of Milwaukee? Is pretty much done, right? Okay.
Yeah, Milwaukee is pretty much
Yeah, I think there's one
nothing.
or two odd percent coming in, which could be a decent number in its own self, right? Depending on whatever remains. There is, I think
Yeah.
Milwaukee is it. Everything else is above at 98%. Milwaukee is at 98%. So
So
a
you
lot
see,
that is going to.
Milwaukee and Jefferson are actually really important in this particular state because these are the two counties that have the state councils and everything. So like it becomes
Yeah.
important to
Again,
sort of
larger,
like
larger sort of urban
yeah spaces. Yeah.
strongholds. Yeah, I
Hmm.
think I think it might be just Milwaukee that is the last remaining
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
area, because we don't see anything else. It's a larger sort of county where Trump has a chance to say, okay,
Hmm.
okay, we have a 93 odd percent that we got here. But then again, this is not going to translate into those many votes, right? I think the
Hmm.
remaining votes in Milwaukee would be sort of more
Yeah.
significant in that regard. We don't see
Yeah.
anything else in terms of the data sort of
Mm.
on this. Yeah, everything's pretty much starting. So I think it might be the sort of southern. I think Milwaukee might be uh, sort of going the Biden way, but then still again, the Trump campaign for viewers again, they have been emphasizing that they'd like it to be. They're saying that this is within the scope or within the threshold for a recount, like, which is
Yeah.
again the moment you get the word recount in a presidential election, there would be some sort of litigation that would pile up. Right? Again, I think much of the Rust Belt, at least these three states, could see things going down to the wire where matters could even be going to the Supreme Court. Right? There was a mention by Trump earlier in the day in his comments that he did make that listen, we were looking for a victory here, but then they stopped counting, and ultimately we will have to move court. So we'll have to also
Mm.
see how that works out. If the Trump campaign sort of decides to sort of generally
Mm.
move the Supreme Court, or I think I'm sure there would
Mm.
be sort of matters pending before district courts in Pennsylvania, uh, and that would be something that still remains to
Mm.
be seen. Right? Again, we have about 10,000 votes
So,
away in
like,
Michigan, 10% still coming in.
yeah,
So
because
again, so Trump has that path, right? He can lose Wisconsin, win
yeah.
Nevada, get Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia in. He still has that path available,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
I think Nevada is turning out to be sort of closer than again, and we've also realized that Arizona might be up. So again, we still have about it's still about 100,000 votes that Trump
Yeah.
is behind by. I think that's going to be different. We have to see
Yeah.
again. It comes from those southern counties here in Arizona that is the south eastern counties, right?
Yeah.
And I think we're
Yeah,
discussing. I think this is where
honestly,
you can expect Trump
yeah.
can expect something from. I don't think Alaska is going to be an issue really, right? I think the vote share
Yeah.
is just 36% is reported as of yet, but I don't think that's going to be any sort of trouble
No.
for
Also,
Trump.
because Alaska is like usually traditionally reported quite late because of, in general, the literal
Yes,
complication is like manpower in Alaska not being available really. Um,
yes, yeah. So that's
so
I think that's going to
yeah.
be uh, the larger sort of thing. Right?
Hmm.
I'm going to sort of just check up on the technicals in terms of the ones that we've
Hmm.
invited. I think we have some video difficulties with our guest, so we're trying to just get him on board for just by him using audio. So let's see
Yeah.
how
That
that
goes,
is
yeah.
going to pan out. Right? But then again, I think Shayad, so we discussed this quite a lot in the morning as well, right? Let's assume that Biden wins this season. Right? We let's even if we go with that assumption, uh, let's look at the work of pollsters. Let's look at the work that has been done by, let's say, 538. Let's look at the work that's been done by many media outfits. Right, we had one of the great
Hmm.
pollsters who was again, he was not predicting a Trump victory. He was not a Trump guy per se, right? And this was
Hmm.
on CNN where he said, "Listen, this is." They were commenting on how the polls were still sort of defeated, and they said, "Listen, it's only those polls which you didn't allow on
Hmm.
CNN that were perhaps getting this right. It's not that they were getting it right for Trump or they weren't. The idea is that what was being predicted by most of these pollsters was that, okay, the chances again 99 to 1, or ultimately this is going to be no way close to what we are seeing right now. Right?
Hmm.
Ultimately, even if sort of Biden manages both of these states, right? Wisconsin, Michigan, even if he wins Nevada, even if he wins Arizona, right? Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan are going to be damn close, right? No matter which
Hmm.
way this ends
So,
up going.
yeah, I
So,
mean, traditionally, look, at the end of the day, even if he wins, like, let's say, it's like, like, even if Trump pushes for his narrative of recounting in Wisconsin, the history is sort of against the swing of 20,000 votes because most of the votes, like the way the validation occurs before a vote is reported, is quite rigorous. The issue that I do feel is arising, and like, of course, from my own personal sources as well as from what I'm reading, is that there is now, because of the flood of absentee ballots, which was not obviously a major thing earlier, is that reporting standards are not the same. There are consequential differences in states like Pennsylvania and California, the way they're
Yes,
sort
again,
of
ultimately
calculated. So
it's all sort of the infrastructure is, and we were also
yeah,
discussing this
like,
in the morning. That the infrastructure is
yeah,
all with the states, right? Though
yeah,
I think in
yeah,
2016 we had parts and bits of it sort of being federalized, but ultimately sort of goes down to the states, and in that
yes,
regard there has to be some, I wouldn't
yeah,
say blame on state administrations, but ultimately it is
hmm,
their responsibility to conduct that election, right? So
hmm,
we don't know of the specific ground realities in these states, but one
hmm,
thing we can see common for all of them is this, that there is these were the states which were supposed to go down to the wire, right?
yeah, that's
In
true.
terms of being
Yeah.
battleground states, and that's what I get Arjun in on as well. Welcome, Arjun. Thanks for joining us again.
Hello, pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to where we left in the afternoon. That's the battleground states. Ultimately, the war is, if I'm allowed to sort of call it that, because the word that's being used here by New York Times is battleground. But ultimately, we see that Wisconsin is damn close, right? Nevada is damn close. Michigan is basically going down to the wire, right?
Hmm.
And even if you assume that North Carolina, Georgia, and Pennsylvania go Trump's way, he would still need his path to the White House,
Mhm.
right? So your sort of initial comments on how the situation has developed since afternoon, and perhaps the role. Again, we discussed this earlier, Arjun. That ultimately we discussed this the night before the election. That even if Trump sort of leads uh, on, let's say, the vote as it stands on that day, it might go down to mail-in ballots and how those sort of coming. Right. My only question to you is going to be, while sure, mail-in ballots have historically sort of supported Democrats, is it possible that it sort of goes down in a manner where 100% of 128,000 votes directly go to one particular candidate? Your comments on that, if you want, I can sort of open up those screens as well, and we can get in that particular infographic that we had in terms of the Trump. And Trump has just tweeted this, right? So your initial comments, and then I'll also. I hope that Twitter is not. Oh, okay, Trump has taken. Okay, yeah. So yeah, the retweet by Trump is still up there, and this is what I'm talking about. I'm just going to. Okay, I don't think it's available on the. Yes, here it is. So that's what I'm talking about. Isn't
Well,
that fascinating?
it is, but in my mind, not very surprising for a handful of reasons.
Hmm.
Firstly, most of the mail in ballots did, and in Michigan, I think a lot of the mail in ballots that were expected did come in from mainly urban city centers.
Yes.
So that plays a huge role that leans by towards Democratic Party generally. Plus, the rhetoric around mail in ballots has also been very negative from Trump. I mean, very few of his supporters did mail in ballots because there was a fear that, hey, it might get lost in the mail, it might not get picked up, it might not get counted. So the rhetoric was also very anti mail in ballot, while the Biden camp, I think, did the right thing, at least strategically, saying, listen, it doesn't matter
Hmm.
how you vote, which way you vote, go use the mail in
Just
ballot if you have to. So that's a huge distinction that needs to be kept in mind, I think.
Absolutely,
hmm.
absolutely. I think those are absolutely some very strong valid concerns. Right? Again, I think I would agree with you 100% there. But at the same time, saying that again, without even attributing any sort of malified here at all, right? I'm saying that it's just interesting, right? It's not something that uh, we would have sort of expected earlier. But then again, the number of mail-in ballots that are coming in, we wouldn't have expected even the kind of voter turnout that we're seeing this year. Yeah.
Mhm.
So that is also something that sort of changed around. Okay. Any comments on how things are looking right now? Paths to victory. You're still. Would you say that you were sort of calling it for Biden, or you want to sort of still wait how Arizona, Wisconsin, and Michigan sort of end up, or perhaps even Nevada for that matter, which is which is still close.
I think Nevada, Biden has it in the bag. Arizona is actually, I think, closer than Nevada. Even though the polls might not seem that way, over the past few hours, it has actually been tightening. So Arizona is the one state that I think Trump needs to count on. I think Wisconsin and Michigan is already lost. I don't think
He's
Trump can
lost.
win
You
that
think
back.
Trump's lost?
Yes, I'm fairly
Yeah,
certain.
I think
If he's
Wisconsin
lost
for sure.
Wisconsin and Michigan, then there's no
Wisconsin for certain. Yeah.
Yeah, Wisconsin for
Yeah,
sure. Like,
if he's lost Wisconsin for sure, and which is, I understand where you're coming in from. Like about 20,000 votes, 3% remaining. It's going to be
not
very
gonna
difficult because I think much of it still comes from Milwaukee, right? And we discussed this earlier in the day as well, that when the votes were coming in, that the tilt sort of happened when when the vote share were coming in from that particular county. That's when the sort of that's when Biden basically overtook. But again, let's
yeah.
assume this, right? Let's assume that you're saying that Nevada's over for Trump as well, though we're currently 86% with about 80,000 votes there, right? About 6.6 odd percent. You think it's too much for Trump to handle? You think it's going to go the Biden way,
It's
which is quite a
I mean, if
possibility.
it was all just on the day votes, it could be a toss up. But now it's pretty much only mail in ballots left by and large. And that has strongly leaned Democratic. So I don't think Trump can make up a lead. That's
Yeah.
significant for
And they're
sure.
saying they're not announcing any results till noon Eastern on Thursday. The remaining ballot vote include mail-in ballots received on election day, those that will arrive over the next week, and
Yeah,
electoral ballots.
yeah. So, like, the thing is that states have different laws for this thing, but the national, uh, juridical perspective on this is 3 days, 3 to 5, I believe. But three is the average that you can allow if a mail-in ballot has the postal stamp of election day. So if
Yeah.
so like and like that's going to happen because what happens is, for example, look at something like India, right? So in India, you get the mail-in ballot came in about a month before election, roughly about 40-ish days
Yeah.
before. But they only get mailed tonight. Like they'll get couriered in the morning tomorrow. So they're not going to be counted. That's why I was telling you that they're not going to be counted, till the state of origin. So I mean, again, and this is true for South Asia because India is the pool for all of the subcontinental countries. Like this is the state where, apart from Singapore, everything else goes from here. Singapore pulls in all of, Thailand, Vietnam, blah blah blah. Like it goes from Singapore. So like again, so like those are going to be consequential, but again, like how much? Because you're looking at a what, like 70,000 total across multiple state, maybe like 80,000 across multiple states split. So like, and a lot of them are going to go to states that are already like decided, like like California or like Ohio or like Oklahoma or something. So like, not very consequential. But in the case of
Again,
Wisconsin, yeah,
yeah. I get your point, right? I think and I also understand where Arjun is coming from. That for Wisconsin, again, he pretty much has to win everything else, which is quite unlikely. So let's assume
yeah,
this, right? Let's try to make a
no,
path for Biden here. So Wisconsin goes the Biden way. Arjun, were you saying that Michigan is also for sure going the Biden way, which is
I would, I mean, I wouldn't say for sure, but I would say about 75, 80% likely.
yeah, because we have about 8% votes still coming in, and it's still 0.6% away. So
Hmm.
that still could be anyone's game. Arizona. Uh, so again, Arjun, I'm not sure if you were aware of this, but so this is the error, and I just sort of read it out a while back. This came in that there was an error in terms of total votes being sort of estimated. So
Yes,
we don't
yeah.
know on which way that's necessarily going to go, but that still leaves some scope for Trump to be able to catch up. Though I think it's quite unlikely because, as we were discussing, the southern counties is where he sort of has any chance whatsoever, right?
Also, from what I understand, that error showed that 99% or 96% of the estimated votes are already reported, when it was
Yes,
actually
yes,
86%. So there he
yes,
still has some scope to regain that. And like I said, it has been tightening. It's not been moving towards
yeah,
Biden.
yeah. So that can still be like, again, like the Trump campaign said, it's not over yet, right? They got really upset at I think Fox News, which called them
Yes.
Biden very early, and I think Trump even mentioned that. So that's something that again there's a possibility it could go survivable. Right? Nevada once again, I honestly think Nevada is still close. Right, Arjun, you said that. Uh, let me just sort of open it up here. Right? Yeah. So
Sure.
you'd said that this pretty much is going Biden's way, right? I still think this is close, and I was honestly throughout the day suggesting that okay, and even before the election, even last year, I said okay, Nevada is very difficult to go the Trump way, right? Ultimately, this is where your sort of stronghold is, right? 84%. You have Clark County, 84%. I'm going to scroll down a bit. 84% sort of coming in here still, and I think. It's going to go the Biden way as well, right? If you just go by, okay, there's 16% of the vote left here. We don't know where it's coming from. Much of it is mail ballots. Um, it's uh, it's pretty much Biden's game if you just go by the fact that okay, Clark County is going to vote. But having said that, right, I'm saying okay, we have about what it's 8,000 votes, right? That's the difference. 7,000 odd votes. So that margin is going to be even, it's going to be 0.6%, right? It is 0.6% right now. So
In
that's
Clark
what I'm
County,
saying. There's, sorry?
it's 0.6% of the vote. Yeah.
0.6% in Nevada. I still think that it's difficult for Trump to win this, but let's assume that he has a chance there. I don't think Nevada and Arizona both could make up for Wisconsin and Michigan being lost out. Right? I think that's not possible because Michigan carries 16 electoral votes. So I think if Trump loses Michigan, it's pretty much it. He can still afford to lose, let's say, Wisconsin and get Nevada or Arizona, preferably Arizona, but I think they'll be just going down to let's say 1 or 2 odd votes or whatever. But the numbers would be like this, right? If Trump gets Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, he can afford to lose Wisconsin if he gets to Nevada or Arizona. So that's going to be the path for Biden, which is a far wider path. Right? The path is sort of much narrower for Trump in that regard that he has to win 2 states here. Right? By 2 here, I obviously mean 5. Right? I don't want to indulge in legalese here, but by that shall mean may. But the idea here is that we're assuming here is a big sort of assumption, sure, but we're assuming that he will win Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. Right. Again, another aspect regarding Pennsylvania, though Trump's leading by a decent number, we can, let's say, look at some sort of litigation also sort of happening in that regard.
But
that's also something
on what basis do you think this litigation could have been fought?
So again, there's some litigation which is anyway sort of outstanding, right? Again, so we're also getting this question in from Aditya Mittal. What's your view on Trump's claim on moving the SC? How valid, right? So that's again, I think we sort of answered all of this sort of together. Right? On some level, I think the Michigan vote that sort of increase, that vertical increase, I think is going to raise eyebrows. At least, let's look at it from the Trump campaign here, right? They would say that okay, there is scope for some nullified conduct here by the state authorities, by the state administrations, and therefore there deserves to be a recount, or as Trump said earlier in the day, that listen, we're going to stop any votes that are sort of counted or that sort of voting happening post this. Right, so that's there. Ultimately, I think Supreme Court litigation of all is going to be about sort of 2 things, right? And to answer Ditya's sort of question as well, and what Arjun was also saying, that on some level, it's going to come to these 2 things. One is, okay, the recount and to what extent that recount will be, the method of the recount. I'm just sort of going back to sort of the 2000 Florida recount in this context. But at the same time, the other aspect is going to be as to at what point you stop counting the new votes coming in. Right now, this is something that Trump has himself mentioned. So that is another important factor that I think could end up in litigation. I'm not saying that it will necessarily be decided or there's a strong claim for the Republicans in that direction, but that is something that could get into litigation. My understanding is that there are already some applications that are filed in pending before district courts in Pennsylvania tomorrow morning. That is sort of morning UST. Eastern time. Whatever the American time is, I think it's Eastern time for Pennsylvania, right? So that's pending tomorrow morning. I think they were filed today, and there's some likelihood that there would be a plea or some submissions for some sort of relief in courts in Pennsylvania, right? Before the elections, a couple of days before the election, we were hearing that a lot of lawyers were being called in from both sides into Pennsylvania because they knew that this is going to go down to the wire. And at the same time, ultimately, more than, let's say, operators on the ground, and we discussed this in the morning as well, more than operators on the ground, there's a likelihood that the Pennsylvania election is going to go down to lawyers, right? How they would be able to pull off in terms of any arguments as to what is to be restricted and what point is to be restricted. I'm reminded of also in the context of Aditya's question, I'm reminded of Arjun and Shire. I'd like to get Arjun first in on this, and then Shire, if you have any comments on this. And on some level, there is, I do recall that the Supreme Court in Bush versus Gore said that this is not to be treated as precedent. If I recall correctly, I think that's what the court said there. But ultimately, I think the standards of the test or the threshold on which it will be decided would be very similar, right? Where is the intent to vote? When was it, right? Even if they'll say, let's say, or Shire, as you mentioned, right? You have a stamp for election day. Is there going to be a question of timing? Right? I don't think we sort of get timing necessarily on some things that are stamped. But let's assume that it's 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. or even 11 p.m. on election day. Is that vote going to be valid? I think those kind of questions could come up, certainly. Right? I'm not saying they would be sort of entertained positively by courts. I'm not saying that courts would necessarily look down upon such arguments either. But I'm saying those are questions which could come within the court's domain. Right? So, and we don't know, I don't think any party has sort of officially moved the Supreme Court yet. We don't know if the Trump campaign is going to end up moving the Supreme Court either. Right? Ultimately, they have to have a path to victory everywhere else, in that those one or two states where they would, let's say, call for a recount or so would want any sort of litigation to start. It would only make sense if everything else is going in their favor. Right? So if you see Trump losing in Nevada, in Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, then there's no point in doing anything of that sort, right? If he loses Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, he's still out. Then maybe, okay, they can challenge the Wisconsin vote by itself. So ultimately, that piece of sort of that litigation is going to be, it'll make sense strategically even only for states which ultimately go down to the wire, and that is the state that decides everything, right? Florida, 2000, it was, I think, about 350 odd votes. I think that was the margin, if I'm not wrong.
Even less, I think about 250 or something like that.
250, yeah. So so I think that deserved a recount for sure. Right? Again, I don't want to make sort of political comments here. What deserves a recount and what doesn't. But the idea was that okay, it deserved some consideration. There was significant margin for some error. 250, 350 odd votes is too damn close. Right. So, Aditya, again, just very briefly, sort of, we hope we've sort of answered what you had asked. But again, Arjun, if you want to come in on that, Shire, if you want to come in on that, any sort of comments with respect to that particular question, if at all? Anything that you think I might not have covered or might have been incorrect about?
I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that Philadelphia, there was a ruling by a district court to allow mail-in ballots for 3 days after the election, irrespective
Yeah.
of, even if the stamp is not visible, and the Supreme Court upheld that decision. It was a 4-4 split, so they didn't overturn the decision, rather.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that
again,
might be the new precedent on point, is to generally grant that authority to the state courts. It's very possible that would be the standard.
So again,
So
I
the
think if it
state.
ends up in sort of the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, it's going to be something that, I mean, the likelihood is that that's going to go against Trump. I mean, just going by
Yeah.
sort of pure partisan lines, I'm not saying that's how it should be or that's how it will end up being, but if at all we sort of go down that path, there's a likelihood that Trump would. And see, even if you go down the Supreme Court of the United States path, right? Let's look at Arjun, as you very correctly said, right? These sort of last few weeks, you had your alleged majority of really extreme right-wing judges, so to say, which we said earlier is not probably the case. It's not been sort of decided on partisan lines, right? Where relief was sought by the Republican Party Pennsylvania itself, that relief was not granted, right? Okay, so guys, I'm going to sort of cut this discussion short, and I'm going to directly welcome our guest who's on board with us. A very warm welcome to Mr. Yashwant Deshmukh. A very warm welcome to you, sir.
Hi, nice to be here.
So for our audience, this is the second time Mr. Deshmukh is joining us, and some of you might recall our discussion earlier in the year where we discussed not just the United States 2016 elections, but the Delhi elections, and he predicted it exactly on point. So, Mr. Deshmukh, it does look like you've had a long day. And
I've been live for almost 16
and I'm
hours.
sure it's going to continue through the week, right? Because it's not just the United States which is having elections; it's also the state of Bihar.
Yeah,
and before we get into sort of Bihar and how sort of your initial comments on the election, the United States election, and spanning out. We hope that you're safe and you're doing well, and we hope that you sort of adequately also rested, because I'm sure it must have been a very long day, as I said. So
it's been a long day. It's been a really long day because we were working all night yesterday, just on the opposite side, and then it's been live for almost like 12 hours now. So that's fine. That's okay. I put you. I had given you the time in the last, but I had decided that I wanted to do this so that I can talk at ease with you. That's okay. Please go ahead.
Yes, and I think it's a pleasure for us to welcome you on our podcast once again. Okay, so your initial comments on how things look, just to give you a brief overview. Again, 97% polling in Wisconsin, with the margin within, I think it's 0.7% favoring Biden at the moment.
Anything less than 1% will automatically go for a recount over there. People are going to challenge that. And besides, it was very clear right from the starting that the three Rust Belt states, they are going to be too close to call. And the fact that Donald Trump had made it very clear that he's going to challenge the postal ballot stuff all the way right up to Supreme Court. So their game plan was very clear right from the day one. They wanted their supporters to come out on the polling day so that those votes go unchallenged and then challenge rest of the stuff. However, the story is not that. The real juice, the real story is that whatever happened to the blue wave, whatever happened to the unprecedented, not even last 100-year kind of sweep, which everybody was talking about, whatever happened to the 12-point lead in the national vote share that liberal media was talking about, whatever happened to the Texas is in swing state category now.
Yeah.
That narrative. So he gets Texas by 7 points. I mean, it's like it was a kind of narrative, Ajay, which was in if I have to compare that with anything in India, that it would be I guess the equivalent narrative would be to say Modi is losing Gujarat. Imagine what will happen in rest of India.
Absolutely.
All
Absolutely. I
right.
think that's
So
why.
Trump is losing Texas. Now imagine what will happen in rest of the US. And that narrative was played by CNN for 3 months in and out, last 3 months. And so shamelessly it was played out that even today, when 7 out of the 8 network had already called in Texas, they took 3 hours more just to accept that Texas has been won by Trump, hands down.
Yeah.
Whatever happened to Florida, whatever happened to Ohio. You see, the story is that there was a silent supporter of Donald Trump. I mean, I'm not saying that Donald Trump has won the presidency. It's very much possible that Mr. Joe Biden might become the next president of America. But there is something fundamentally wrong with that country. That country is bitterly divided halfway through. And it was divided for almost like last many years, you know. And the voices that could carry the country together, they are getting less and less. And the fact that the red states become more redder, the blue states become more bluer, it only exposed the fault lines of that country. Again, it only exposed the deep fault lines of that demography, that country, and the lack of assimilative voices. Why did Barack Obama carry so many other states which were not blue? Because he was seen as a voice who could heal, who he was seen as a voice who could go non-partisan um, to take the country along with him. Why did that entire asset of political capital or social capital of Barack Obama did not go with Joe Biden? After all, he was deputy of Barack Obama for 8 long years.
Yes.
Why
True.
did it not
Absolutely.
happen? So we have some very serious questions to ask because this is not just a US election. We are living in a world where US and Bihar are literally connected. I mean, not metaphorically, but literally in terms of campaigns, in terms of public opinion, and in terms of coronavirus.
Absolutely.
And we are having an election, and the election is all about jobs. Election is about the bottom of the pyramid workers. Election is about what we call as Dihadi Mazdoor in Bihar and daily wage worker in blue collar worker in US, because in US, it's on the hourly basis. The payment is on the hourly basis. The working class in US. So yes, the economies are different. The wealth levels are different. I understand, but at the end of the day, me, you, for that matter, even Donald Trump or Joe Biden, we remain human beings. Our reactions are going to be the same. So a working class reaction in US is equivalent to that Dihadi Mazdoor, the migration seasonal migrant labor who has gone back to Bihar and is angry and upset with the government over there because there was nothing in there for him to go back to home without job and to and walked for hundreds and hundreds of kilometers because there was nothing for him to fetch him or her back home somewhere in Bihar. So at that level, when you look into the reactions, it's humbling. You have to see through the reactions in a way uh, that these mandates start making logic, making sense to all of us. Why exactly Joe Biden is not sweeping America, arguably after the worst possible presidency in 100 odd years? Why is he not sweeping?
True.
That's the
True.
question for you and everybody who is going to analyze.
Absolutely. I think some very, absolutely very valid points there, sir. And I think the comments that were coming in from the media and even the pollsters was that Biden was actually going to outperform Barack Obama in many of the counties or areas or states And obviously that's something that's not been seen, right? This is still something that is going down to the wire. Sure, in some particular areas, some particular counties, he has slightly outperformed Hillary Clinton, right? For example, Arizona, which Trump won, which was pretty close last time round as well. Arizona still could go down to the wire because we just received an update that there was an error, and it wasn't 96 odd percent votes that were counted, but about 86%. So Trump still has, and the Trump campaign has been saying this since morning. They've been going out it at Fox News that you can't call it this early. Is that perhaps they have a shot there? And as you very correctly said, it's not like it's within 1% right now, but if at some point it does go there, right? Because some of the southern counties still have some scope for Trump there, but it's sort of lesser likely than some of the other states. Perhaps.
Well, the biggest difference is that each state has maybe each county has a different set of rules. Some of them started counting the postal ballot first and absentee later, and then the polling day voters last. Some did the other way around. So that's a big difference between Pennsylvania and Arizona. In Pennsylvania, they started, Michigan and Wisconsin, they started counting the polling day, election day ballots first. That is why Trump came away with a huge lead, because the polling day ballots are like 60-40 skewed in favor of Trump, while the postal ballots are skewed 60-40 in favor of 70-30 in favor of Biden. So the more postal ballots are going to be counted, the more Trump lead is going to shrink in the three Rust Belt states. But it's the opposite as far as Arizona is concerned. Just the opposite, because they counted the postal ballot first. It's for them the counting day thing that are being counted. I mean, the election day things that are going to be counted in the last. So this is why in Arizona, Biden started with a huge lead, and then it came on changing, and now it's like touch and go. And if there are 14% or more still to be counted, it's not over. It's certainly not over. Yeah, but the thing is, when people say there is a problem with Trump saying we should count till the last vote in Arizona but not in Pennsylvania, there is a difference. Difference is, count till the last vote in Arizona means those who stood in line and they voted. Counting till last vote counted in Pennsylvania means including the voters whose ballots are going to arrive till 6th of November.
Yes.
That is the procedural thing. Now, this law was changed just a few days back. Earlier, it was till 3rd of November. Then they said that we need to add 3 more days. And that was challenged. And Supreme Court said, no, this challenge will be kept aside. You can continue with the process. But Supreme Court did not give a judgment whether counting those 3 days is legit and correct thing to do. This is why Supreme Court told the election board over there, you need to mark and keep those 3 days ballots separate.
Yeah.
They still have to give a judgment. So both are not equivalent. We may find a million other things and bad things about Trump and everything, but procedurally speaking, this I don't find any fault in that when he says that he has challenged, he can challenge, no doubt about that. But that challenge is very different from the votes not being counted till the last in Arizona, because they are in-person votes, majority of them, and they have to be counted. They need to be counted.
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely on point, and this is something we've been discussing early in the morning as well, and even just a couple of minutes ago as well. That on some level, it's not something that's going to. Sure, it might be seen as partisan. It will be seen as a political leader, a president filing some litigation, but it is within the ambit of how the law stands currently, right? Like, again, it's not something which we are saying that the court will look at favorably necessarily, but there is an argument to be made before the court pertaining to how the situation is currently.
Exactly.
So
and legal things will go the legal way. I mean, I have seen and covered even the 2000 fiasco. We have seen what happened in Florida, and we have seen what happened in Florida today. I mean, you cannot win Florida without taking into the big number of Latino voters. You cannot win Ohio without taking in the working class voters.
Absolutely.
So there is fundamentally something wrong, which people and particularly the mainstream media did not read it correct. For me, Biden can still become the president. It's fine, but they have lost the moral high ground to tell average American how much they hate Trump. No, it doesn't make any sense. The numbers don't show that average American hates Trump. No, I'm sorry. I mean, that is a line I will not buy anymore.
The vote share has gone up since 2016. I think he's got 5-6 million more votes this year. Yeah.
Exactly. And still it is possible that in the national vote share, Biden eventually might be leading by 3 or 4 points. I mean, I'm not denying that.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm not denying that. But that's the election system they follow. That's for them to decide.
Absolutely.
But the thing is that that country is bitterly divided. And the fault lines are getting deeper. And the liberal narrative of pushing the centrist voters to the right wing just because being illiberal. So it's like you are not liberal enough has become the new mantra of the liberals, right? So ideologically speaking, that positioning from the moralistic high ground that, oh, you are not liberal enough for me. How wrong that is, how illiberal that is.
True.
To start
Absolutely.
with. And I guess that the common voter of US, a big number of silent voter in US, has revolted against that. They revolted 4 years back, they revolted again, and still the political elite of America and elsewhere is they are not understanding it. This has happened in UK. The Labour in UK pushed the centrists so much, accusing the centrists of not being liberal enough, that they joined the ranks of Tories.
Absolutely.
That's what happened in UK.
Yes.
Okay, so when we talk about New Zealand and Jacinda Ardern and her magnificent victory, she has won because the centrists supported her, because she did not take a unnecessarily moral high ground of judging others of not being liberal enough. So if you are a liberal who is not judging, who is a real sense in a liberal without judging others and have the capacity to carry everybody with you, you can win like a landslide, like Ardern did in New Zealand. But if you are a liberal who is judging everyone who is not agreeing with you, that's what identifies the Labour Party leadership in UK and Democrats in USA right now, then you are likely to push and turn a sizable centrist silent majority who is not right-winger, but you are pushing them to become a right-winger just because you are humiliating them.
Absolutely.
That's the bottom line. That's what has happened in India. India, you have seen that. Me and you and everybody have seen that. That's precisely what has happened, the narrative in India.
Yes.
Right?
I think that's absolutely on point, sir. That's absolutely on point. And just earlier in the morning when Florida was still to be called, and you're right that even at 96% vote share, Florida was still not being called for Trump, or 96% being sort of estimated in. And the interesting part there was that if you want, I can also sort of open the map. Would you like me to get the maps on the screen, sir?
Yeah, sure. I've got that over here, but for your viewers, it would be nice if they want to see. That's fine with me. Yeah.
Yes, I think we might be able to. Yes, so here we have the map, and we saw Florida, and we saw here again. I think Trump's got a significant. Again, there's quite a difference there in terms of sort of the numbers, and I think it's still at about 96%. It was eventually called. I think 94% was not being called yet. But the important point was the areas where he has won have ultimately been areas where you have a higher percentage of Hispanic voters.
Exactly.
Right? So this has been something which was being, and same goes with Ohio, right? There was a significant portion of Hispanic voters that were voting in, and we saw people suggesting that, okay, fine, Cubans are now cancelled, and these guys are the new whites, and so on and so forth. So that's sort of a identity politics narrative.
That's precisely what they are doing. That's, you see, the Cuban and the Venezuelans, basically the Latinos coming from these two countries and other countries where they have fled due to the socialist oppression. They are allergic to Democrats. That's what said now by the analysts, by the liberal analysts. That's how they are trying to analyze it. So basically, that is judging again. You know, you are a Latino from Cuba. You are not Latino enough because you voted Trump. You are a Latino from Venezuela. You are not a Latino enough. Same thing in India. You see, I'm not saying. I mean, you see, funny thing. When I read analysis of minority votings in India, there is a term which is now used by the literal media and the liberal media, Sarkari Muslims. What is a Sarkari Muslim? The Muslims who are voting for the BJP. You are a Muslim, you are voting for the BJP, you are not Muslim. That means you are not Muslim enough. Are you getting that stereotyping? Are you getting the gist that this is where it is heading? 20 years back, this country in India where we live, I mean, where we work and live, and 20 years back, hardly 2 or 3 out of 100 Muslims voted for BJP. In the last 5 years, that number has shot up to almost like in many states, almost 20 to 30%. Sarkari Muslims. Why? If you are a Muslim, you are not supposed to vote for the BJP. You are not Muslim enough. That's the narrative issue with this narrative, which is so illiberal, which is so damn bloody illiberal. Who are you to decide that a Muslim is not Muslim or should be a Muslim enough or not if he or she votes for a certain party?
Absolutely.
That's their democratic right. I would not like to judge. You are a Hindu. If you do not vote for the BJP, one should not be judging you are not Hindu enough. Why should we be judging that? Right?
True.
So same is the fact with the you are not black enough if you have voted for Trump. How can you vote? You are not Latino enough. These kind of indirect judgments, I will not say this has happened directly in the campaign, but indirect profiling of people, blue-collared workers. There is something wrong with that narrative setting, I would say.
That's true.
Honestly speaking, any sane person, any person with slightest of the liberal value and the head in its right place might not like a candidate like Trump to win in his or her society. All right? There must be something that people must be hating so much more that they even like to vote for Trump. And that is something which, unless the liberals or the Democrats do not analyze that, they are not going to recover. And my problem with that entire thing is, God forbid if Mr. Biden wins the presidency. God forbid, why I am saying that? Not because I don't want him to be the president. God forbid, because if he wins the presidency, the Democrats and the liberals are going to brazen it out rather than analyzing the mistakes that they have done. They are going to celebrate this thing as if they have won not 270 but 370 and 400 electoral college votes. Not as if they have won 49% vote, but as if they have won 70-80% of the votes in America. They are not going to do the self-introspection. Why 50% of America, even after such a failed, arguably such a failed presidency of someone, a disaster called Donald Trump, is still not voting for you? That doesn't tell much of Trump. That tells a lot about you. What big failure you are that 50% of Americans, even after such a disastrous presidency, are not willing to vote for you.
True.
And they are not going to analyze that. They are going to brazen it out in the narrative setting and the agenda. They are going to. That's why, God forbid, I am using that term.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that Biden. I mean, I'm willing that Biden becomes. He's a nice guy. Must be a nice guy. I have nothing to hold against him in person. But what happens to the next narrative setting? And those narrative settings have global proportion. We know for sure, right? It's the same. Ajay, it is the same narrative setting which did not allow a visa to then Gujarat Chief Minister. Are you getting it?
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely get it.
And then how much they had to bend over backward to repair the relationship with Prime Minister Modi, which they had broken so badly with the Chief Minister Modi. While both of them were democratically elected leaders, and when you are not granting visa to that guy, and that was by the way, Republican, that was a Republican
Administration. It was
administration.
George Bush.
So it's
Bush
not about, yeah, that's why I'm not saying that a partisanship. I'm just talking about how the narratives are set in, right? And it took a Democrat president to repair that friendship. You know, the way Obama went out of the way to drive around Mr. Modi in Washington D.C. and coming back to India on 26th of January. That is the kind of repairing he had to do. Not a joke. And that has everything to do with the narrative setting of those 50 liberals writing a letter to the Capitol Hill that you should not be granting visa to that. In one of my visits over there, sometimes in 2013, I mean, I was there right after the 2012 elections. In a private gathering, a very, very nervous set of people asked me, who is going to win? Number one, is Modi is really going to become? Number two, if he becomes, what will happen to the India-US relationship? And I said, in the same words, yes, he is going to win. He is going to become the prime minister, and you need some serious damage control on a personal level. All right. And once that we were having lunch, I asked very lightheartedly to them, whomsoever gave the idea of not granting him a visa, because Republicans are supposed to be good friends of India, and Democrats arguably have been not really that good with India in that way. But I just asked them, what happened? Why did you deny him a visa? He was, when you were dealing with the Gaddafis and everybody under the sun, all the despots, autocrats, and you were not giving visa to a democratic leader of India, chief minister. Why exactly? And they came with an answer. You believe us not, but it was just a procedure. We did not play it that way. It just happened, and we never thought it was a big deal. And I was taken aback. They never thought it was a big deal. Seriously?
Yeah. So
you need to be careful when you are analyzing all these things, how the global narratives are being set and how they are playing out.
Absolutely. I think it's a very valid point that you make regarding setting a narrative. And just perhaps we don't want to take a lot of your time, but we've discussed this earlier as well. Any comments on how, I'm sure you must be following how Nate Silver has been commenting on Twitter over the last few days. And on some level, my personal opinion is that it reeks of arrogance, even still, like on election day, the way he has been sort of handling how the results are coming out. And even if you look at a Biden victory, which is quite a possibility here, he's been way off. He's been way off to everything. And now he's coming up with random points. He was trying to hedge his bets last night. Listen, if he loses Pennsylvania, Biden is an underdog and all of those things. It goes back to the conversation we had at the beginning of the year that on some level, pollsters, aggregators, and sure, they have their biases, they have their influences, but they mustn't forget that they are also part of sort of shaping that narrative to a large extent, right? And we can't see their skin in the game. Now, even if Biden wins, we can say for sure that 2 elections consecutively, Mr. Silva got it wrong. Right? And then he says that, like,
I will not go personally against him. He's a nice guy, decent guy.
Yeah. I'm just on his.
Yeah. But there is definitely problems out there. Their problems are more complex than that one. You see, after the 2008 economic downturn, there were serious budgetary cuts. We were doing surveys in 2008 and 2012. Till that point of time, we were doing all telephonic surveys. And then there were serious budget cuts after the economy, went into shambles. And then all the agencies who were treating online panels as unscientific, within 4 years, they started treating them as scientific. While we know for sure that the online samples are non-probability sample. They are not really the probability sample. They should not and they cannot be treated at par with the probability sample. So in 2016, when we did everything online, we said upfront that this is non-probability. We got it right, by the way. We were among the only 2 polls who said that Trump is winning the electoral college. But we said it upfront. The problem with the majority of the pollster 4 years back was they went for herding. And because of the national lead of Clinton in vote share, that herding started happening in a way that they started calling all the swing states in favor of Clinton, without realizing that they have to say that it is too close to call when it is too close to call. So the 5 states which were less than a 1% margin in our data, we simply went ahead and said these are too close to call, and electoral college is up for toss because they cannot be called till the results are in. So they went for herding. They did wrong. They did not learn much from that. They continued with the panels without realizing that there are perils of doing online samples without fine-tuning the fact that the silence, spiral of the silence is working for the conservative voters, those who are longing for what you call as confirmation bias, affirmative bias, social desirability bias, that one who is not living in a deep red state might not like to say in social conversation that I am a Trump supporter. All right. And second handicap of the online panels is that it gives you disproportionate number of youngsters in the panel and lesser number of older people who are not very comfortable with the smartphone and the technology.
Yes.
In your family, my family, we know elders who are not really comfortable doing everything on phone. Okay? And couple that with the fact that on the polling day, it is the older people who actually get out and vote more sincerely than the youngsters who are not that serious about going out and vote. That's the point number 2, which went wrong in their entire exercise. And point number 3 was that in this entire turnout and this online panel and adjustment for the confirmation bias, they also, I guess that they messed up with the fact that this was an election which was fought in 3 different layers. The layer of postal ballot, the layer of in-person absentee ballot, and then the layer of those who are going to vote on the election day. So we got to know how many people asked for ballot, postal ballot. That correction was taken in. How many were in by the time the analysis went in. We got to know how many people have voted early. They were counted as getting in. But the enthusiasm level of Trump supporters who were willing to stand in the line on the polling day and turn out in unprecedented numbers, that was something which got messed up with majority of the posters. They did not realize that there is a silent voter out there who is going to come out on that day and get into line and vote and may not accept that I did vote for Trump, particularly in the states which are not really red state. So all these things, I think the polling companies over there need to introspect a lot on these grounds. We did polling, but for as a backend, and we are working on a daily tracker model, which we are planning to launch on 1st of January for US. So it will be a different thing by that time. But a lot of learning, and then the herding due to the narrative set in by the mainstream media, that you started believing in that lie that Texas could go Biden, that you started believing in that lie that Florida is one sided, that you started believing in the lie that Ohio is gone. Somewhere it started probably affecting the analysts over there with the confirmation bias. Okay, everybody else is saying so, so I should be saying so. And
Absolutely.
I don't,
Absolutely.
and the risk of not sticking your neck out and saying, not happening, that's not happening, that's the peril.
I think that's absolutely on point. It's always a pleasure to have you with us, Mr. Deshmukh.
Always a pleasure, Ajay.
Again,
Always a
there are
pleasure.
very interesting developments coming in. There are suggestions that there was an instant increase, vertical increase. I just sort of get this in just
Yeah.
to sort of give you a show of this. Donald Trump
Yeah.
campaign also got into this. Twitter says that this isn't really. Well, they want to look at it with some suspicion as disputed data. Again, all of these are coming in, and we'll sort of continue to track this. It's always a
It
pleasure
is going
having
to take
you.
days. It's going to take days and weeks,
Yes, yes,
probably.
absolutely. This is not something that's going to be decided right away. But because you say 10 days, and this is the note that I wanted to end our conversation on, is that in about 10 days, you have another election um, finishing. And obviously, now this is also going to be an election depending on how the LJP versus JDU vote's going to go. This is going to be a post-election, a post-vote election, which is going to be decided in the post-election calculus, right, in terms of building of alliances. And that's how Bihar has been over the years, right? Whether we see a Maharashtra kind of government forming in, or whether uh, sort of a younger leader sort of sticks with the NDA, comes back to the NDA fold, and JDU sort of his hand is forced. So those combinations are also going to be really interesting. I'm not going to take a lot of your time. It's post 10:30, but I would like to extend an invitation to you, not on the day of the election, perhaps 3-4 days post that, whenever it's going to be more comfortable for you to join us. But
Sure.
perhaps, let's say 14th, 15th, even after the 15th or
I would
16th
love
of
to.
November,
I would love to.
whenever sort of.
Just give me a day or two post counting, and I
Yes.
would love to be with you, join you.
Absolutely. It would be an honor and a privilege for us to once again host you post the Bihar elections. And there's more skin in the game for us Indians here to sort of examine an Indian election. And
Well,
I'm
it's
sure
very
that.
humbling experience, I can tell you, to have the US data in one window and Bihar data in one window, and to tend to see that at the end of the day, humans and their perceptions and the way they react, they remain human. It doesn't matter it is in Boston or is it in Bihar.
Absolutely. Absolutely. From Boston, Bihar, on some level, elections are ultimately, as much as they would be about numbers, and I think it's a beautiful note to end on, more than numbers, they're ultimately about humans, sentiments of humans.
Exactly.
And ultimately, that is what is to be respected, no matter what direction a particular election goes. It is, on some level, the importance that we must realize that it is the will of the people and the transfer of power through peaceful means. That's
Absolutely.
something that we take for so granted. But
That's
over
right.
the history that we've had, that has not always been the
We
norm.
shall
And
discuss
absolutely
that.
thank
We shall discuss
we
that.
shall absolutely discuss this. It's a pleasure having had
All
hosted
right.
you once again, and we look
Pleasure.
forward to hosting you about 10 days from now once again.
Thank you.
So
Thank you
much
so
for
much.
joining us, Mr. Deshmukh.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you so much. Okay, so that's pretty much it in terms of our discussion. The numbers aren't moving much for the states that have been locked in. Sure, Pennsylvania numbers are going in bits by bits. The litigation is going to start early morning in the United States, perhaps goes on in other states, barring apart from Pennsylvania as well. It's been an interesting day. It's been an interesting night here in India as well as in the States. And we hope to continue this conversation with all of you not just in the context of how the American elections pan out. Right, I already have suggestions from my panelists, as well as from our viewership, that we have a third part to this American election, which we will absolutely be contemplating, and we will be considering having that third part perhaps closer to how things pan out in terms of both the final vote shares, the electoral college, and, if at all, any pending litigation between the two sides. Right. Thank you so much for joining us. We also, as I've already mentioned, we also plan that post the results, we would also be discussing the Bihar Legislative Assembly elections. Do join us for that as well. Continue writing to us with your comments, suggestions about the areas, specific areas that you would want us to deal with in terms of economics, law, politics, strategy, and even technology and history. Right. Thank you so much for joining us. Good night. Take care of yourself, and at the end of the day, especially for the American election, just a side note that it must be taken in a light-hearted manner. Right, it's not something that's to be taken entirely seriously. It's just to be enjoyed. Right? Very often we hear that these are gladiatorial sports. Right? It's an American election is not like a gladiatorial sport. Very often we forget that ultimately we must also enjoy it as a sport more than anything else, as a spectator, if nothing else. Right? Not that election don't have or for that matter, as even in many elections that happen within our country itself. At times, it's a good idea to see it as just a festival, a celebration of democracy, as a celebration of the fact that we get to vote and decide how the transfer of power happens. Right? So take it as a celebration, as a sport, even. Enjoy it. Don't take it too seriously. Don't take it to heart, and don't let an election result affect the friendships and the relationships that you have with family and friends. Thank you so much for tuning in. That's too much talk off script, at least from my side here for the IVA here. So take care. Good night. Stay safe. Bye-bye.